Yes, Argyria nervosa, if you're an enthusiast of obscure hallucinogens, this is one to reckon with. Possibly, gram for gram, it is the most powerful plant hallucinogen on the planet. And yet, though there are 13 species of Argyria, all containing psychoactive compounds, spread from Kerala in India down through Micronesia, there's no history of human usage in that entire cultural area. So there are mysteries about who knows these things. You know, when you go to the Amazon, most people have a kind of noble savage prejudice, and they think that it has to be the naked people who are off river, who are very wild and woolly, and then they make the good ayahuasca. Often this is not the case. Often it's the guy who lives on the edge of Iquitos or Pucallpa who tends his garden and is fairly conversant with the modern world. Some of you may know F. Bruce Lamb's book, Rio Tigre and Beyond. He describes a situation in there where a man who had in his youth been kidnapped by Indians and learned to make very good ayahuasca. Later, he encounters another tribe of Indians. He's on a rosewood collecting expedition to a remote part of the jungle, and he encounters these Indians, and they invite him to take ayahuasca with them. And it's just garbage as far as this guy can tell. So he says, I'll show you how they do it where I come from, and makes it for these people, and literally becomes a culture hero overnight, is hailed as the great reformer of their ritual, and just simply because he showed them how to get really, really smashed on it. And yeah, the DMT is in the desmanthus, and the pergamon contains the MAO inhibiting harmaline.
It's in the seed of the desmanthus.
No, it's in the root bark scrapings. And the harmaline in pergamon harmala is spread throughout the plant and concentrated in the little black seeds. If you don't want to drive out to Elko, find an Iranian market here in LA and tell them that you want to buy Hurmal, Hurmal, and they will sell you the seeds of pergamon harmala. It's used in Iranian households as a fumigant and incense. You just throw some on a charcoal, on a bed of coals, and it makes this wonderful incense-like smoke, which is actually intoxicating. I mean, a wonderful thing to do if you want to do some exploratory chemistry is take half a dose of mushrooms, and then after a couple of hours, smoke some pergamon harmala in a bong or a pipe. And the MAO inhibiting characteristic of the harmaline will immediately lift the curtain for about 15 minutes on a very spectacular series of very cool hallucinations. In other words, they're hallucinations where you can just sit and look, thinking, my goodness, this is fascinating and compelling, rather than the other kind of hallucination where you're, you know. So we call this mushroom plus pergamon harmala combination vegetable television, because it's approximately that engaging, but very, very non-threatening and reassuring for beginners. That's a half dose of mushrooms. After an hour and a half, smoke a quarter of a teaspoon of pergamon harmala seeds. Many people have taken psychedelic drugs and never gotten past the hypnagogia. They don't know that there's something out there besides dancing mice and spinning geometric wheels and stuff like that. But beyond that, you cross over. And that's the typical model of a trip. Now, what happens with all of these things to greater and lesser degrees, LSD, psilocybin, mescaline, ayahuasca, is, and I've never actually ever heard an explanation for this. For some reason, the experience comes in waves. There's the first wave, that makes sense. That's the drug taking hold. But why then, after 20 minutes of unbelievably outlandish hallucination, will it like all stop? You know, and it's like a moment ago you were screaming for mercy. Now you look around and you say, I'm down. Am I down? I seem to be down. And, you know, and sometimes you seem to come all the way down. Like on LSD, it's like it totally turns off sometimes. And then about 5 minutes later, it comes again. And you get another wave. And if you've taken a really dedicated hit of ayahuasca, for example, you will get like as many as 5 or 6 of these waves throughout the evening. And the first one is usually the strongest. If you take a effective but not strong dose of ayahuasca, you will get one pass. And often, and then if you take slightly less, you'll get one pass and it will be weak. So if you take ayahuasca, at all times pay attention, because you may be looking at something thinking, well, this is not so interesting. I'm sure it's going to be much better in an hour. And you may actually be looking at as good as it's going to get that evening. And psilocybin also comes in waves like this. LSD very dramatically. DMT not, because DMT is one enormous brief wave. I mean, DMT sort of brings all the issues together. And the way I think of these psychedelics experientially is as a series of concentric circles. Maybe like the outer circle is mescaline, and the next circle in is LSD, and the next circle in is psilocybin, and the next circle in is DMT. It's almost as though the psychedelic experience is whatever drug or whatever substance you take, it leads you deeper and deeper in the same direction. And of course, with DMT, you not only hear the aliens, you see the aliens. You not only see the aliens, you become an alien. It seems to be the most radical of all of these things in terms of the experience. It's also the most natural of all of these things. It also is the safest. It stands the ordinary standards of courage and risk on their head, because here it is, it's the most terrifying, the most spectacular, and the safest. None of us, including myself, have fully come to grips with this paradox. We would rather do less safe, less scary drugs, I think. DMT is pretty impressive in most situations. Now, I want to totally contradict myself. This is not only everybody's prerogative, but it's your obligation. If you don't contradict yourself, your position isn't complex enough. I will talk a little bit about what I've learned from psychedelics. I feel self-conscious doing it, but on the other hand, wouldn't it be stupid for me to talk about what you've learned from psychedelics? That would add presumption to the sins already arrayed here. There are different models about what the psychedelic experience is. Here's a couple. Building on Western psychotherapy as elaborated by Freud and Jung, one view of what psychedelics are is it's the part of your mind that you'd rather not do business with. It's the memories of childhood neglect or abuse. It's repressed kinky fantasies. It's, in other words, the Freudian idea of the unconscious, that somehow these are drugs which dissolve the boundary between conscious and unconscious mind, and then you can do accelerated psychotherapy because resistances have been pharmacologically overcome. That's one model. It's good as far as it goes. It just doesn't go far enough. Then there's another model, which I would call the traditional or shamanic model. And it says the cosmos is a series of levels, and these levels are connected by vertical routes of access, which can be thought of as simply flights through space, or magical trees, or magical ladders. Anyway, there's an image of ascent. And ordinary people exist on only one of these levels. But a shaman is not an ordinary person. A shaman is a superhuman person who has the power of animal allies behind them, and they can go up and down in these elevators that move between levels, and they can therefore recover lost souls, see social hanky-panky, theft and adultery, see the causes behind that, see the causes behind disease, so forth and so on. That would be the traditional one. What I have concluded after 25 years of fiddling with this is that both of those ideas have a certain something to recommend them, but that they don't go far enough, and that we get more to the meat of this if we leave off psychological, the first explanation, or sociological, the second explanation, and actually go for something a little more formal, to wit, a mathematical model of what shamanism is. And what I mean by that is, let's think about what shamans do. They cure disease, and another way of putting that is they have a remarkable facility for choosing patients who will recover. They predict weather. They're very important. They tell where game has gone, the movement of game, and they seem to have an paranormal ability to look into questions, as I mentioned, who's sleeping with who stole the chicken, social transgressions are an open book to them. Well, thinking about this from a mathematician's point of view, an all-encompassing explanation that would explain how all these magical feats are done is simply to suppose that the shaman is somehow able to project his consciousness, his or her consciousness, into a higher dimension. Not metaphorically, as in Sylvester Stallone has many dimensions, not metaphorically, but literally, as in 1 dimension, 2 dimension, 3 dimensions, and 4. Because if you could move into the 4th dimension, the dimension orthogonal to Newtonian space-time, seeing what the weather is going to be next week is as easy as seeing what the weather is now. Seeing where the game went is as easy as seeing where the game are. Knowing who stole the chicken is simply defined by looking to see who stole the chicken. And I have noticed that all of biology, not simply shamanism within the context of human society, but all of biology is, in a sense, a conquest of dimensionality. That as we ascend the phylogeny of organic life, what animals are a strategy for conquering space-time. And complex animals do it better than simpler animals. And we do it better than any complex animal. And we 20th century people do it better than any people in any previous century, because we can bind data in so many ways that they couldn't, electronically, on film, on tape, so forth and so on. Here's what I'd like to suggest. This is one way of thinking about it, that our planet is on a collision course with something which we actually, at our present state of knowledge, don't have a word for. A black hole is simply a gravitationally massive object, so massive that no light can leave it. What I'm talking about is something like that, except that it isn't so much gravitationally massive as temporally massive. We are being sucked into the body of eternity. And I think it's going to happen very soon. Now, an obvious objection that someone would make to this, it's a probabilistic objection, is they would say, don't you find it rather unusual that your own very minute and finite life should occur so close to this moment of universal dramatic climax? Doesn't that clue you to the fact that you might be slightly deluded? To which I reply, not at all.
Well, the days they fly by lightning fast, I'm waiting for the thunder. Don't know where you're going or where you're from, but would you like to come on under? Would you like to come on under? Would you like to come on under? My feet are cold, but my head is dry, and the sky is falling up, coming down. Let me walk you around.